I am Nomura Furuta, and you are watching Nomura, Channel 2 News. Wondering how the Dragon Kagane will affect your morning commute? Stay tuned and we will update you on the traffic situation and where to avoid those monsters. And coming up a little later, a new clown organization is rising in popularity. See when you can book them for your child's next birthday party. And then, rounding out the hour, hormones are one thing, but ghoulification is another. We talk to Dr. Kano from Beyond the Grave to see how you can deal with your kids' changing bodies. But to dive into our first story, we go live to Shoan Ross, where just moments ago, a 23-year-old man who was recently dragged out of Dragon and thought to be in a coma forever has recently regained consciousness. His friends and loved ones must be very relieved. Over to you, Sean. How is it going, everybody, and welcome back to another review on Tokyo Ghoul. Today we're talking about chapter 163, entitled Unbreakable. Now, after reading this chapter multiple times and even going through different translations, I feel like I now have a better understanding about certain sections of this chapter than I initially had during my live reaction. But even though I now have a better understanding, I still feel like this overall chapter is just a decent chapter of Tokyo Ghoul. It wasn't great, but I feel like it was just good because a lot of people, I feel after talking with you guys, a lot of your expectations weren't really met, and I could say me included, with what transpired in this chapter with Kaneki regaining consciousness and not really talking with any of his friends that were waiting in that room hoping for Kaneki to regain consciousness. And I can understand where Ishida was going with this chapter because he needed to catch Kaneki up to speed on all that has transpired ever since he turned into Dragon. He doesn't know how much destruction him turning into Dragon caused to Tokyo. He doesn't know about the Kagane monsters that are being created from Dragon, or the fact that humans are turning into ghouls. And to add on to that, he also needs to catch up to speed on knowing that the GOAT organization and the CCG are now working together. And then to top that all off, the biggest bombshell that I'm really glad we didn't waste any time in delivering to Kaneki was actually telling him that Hide was alive. This is something I kind of was hoping wasn't going to be dragged out, that Kaneki would learn right away. And within the same chapter that Kaneki is getting reacquainted with all of his friends and family, he gets the biggest news that could honestly be the best news Kaneki could ever hear. His friend that he thought has been dead this whole time, Hide, is in fact alive. So I'm glad we got that Hide bombshell done and out of the way with, but right now I am hoping that in the next chapters to come, Kaneki does sit down and have some conversations with all of those people that have been waiting for him to regain consciousness. And the top three that I am really looking forward to are Mitsuki, Toka, and Hide, preferably in that order. So if I can get those conversations in the next 10 to 20 chapters, I will be very satisfied. And any other character in the meantime that manages to talk to Kaneki, like Hinami, Tsukiyama, Yomo, Miza, any other character, Akira or Amon, if we can have those conversations within the next 10 to 20 chapters, or at least before the series comes to an end, I think I will be pretty satisfied with that. But the last two sections really improved upon this chapter for me, where initially I didn't really find the section with Kaneki, Saiko, and Urei discovering a human-turned ghoul all that interesting, because this was information I already knew, and it kind of just allowed Kaneki to understand what is currently going on with the humans throughout Tokyo. But then Ishida decided to throw in a small part one character into this transformation, into this circumstance of them being a human, turning into a ghoul. This goes to show that he's had this reveal planned for quite some time, and the irony and the cruelty within this transformation I find to be very fascinating. And to top it all off, we have Furuta taking on the role and persona of a news reporter, and he's gearing up to interview with a Kagane monster. This man at this point transcends trolling. He is a walking meme at this point. He makes me laugh every time he pops up in a chapter. I love his character so much, but I'm also very curious to see how this fits into the grand scheme of Furuta's master plan. Because when you have Furuta reporting the news, you don't know if he's telling the truth or telling lies. And also, if he's going to talk about Kaneki, will he talk positively about Kaneki, or will he spin it negatively about Kaneki? Only time will tell. Hopefully, we'll learn more about that in the coming chapters. But for right now, guys, I just want to start back at the beginning of this chapter. We'll work our way back to Furuta. There's a lot to talk about. Even though I said this was a decent chapter, there are still some interesting things in here that we should discuss just a little bit further. So let's start back at the very beginning where we see Kaneki walking through the rubble of Tokyo, where we see him finally confronting the sins like he mentioned back in that dream sequence with Rize. These first 2 pages serve as a flash forward to show us where Kaneki is during the second half of this chapter when he's walking the streets with Psycho and Ure. But what I love about these first 2 pages is that it really goes to show that Kaneki is actually ready to confront his sins, and he's trying to comprehend the magnitude of the destruction that he ended up causing turning into Dragon, because we see Kaneki walking the streets. He sees people getting debris out of the way, people tending to the injured, but he also sees people tending to the dead. There are dead people littering the streets, and Kaneki is coming face to face with that fact that while transforming into Dragon and falling into Furuta's trap, he ended up killing a lot of people. And instead of changing into another persona or pushing his problems onto somebody else, he is staying who he is, and he's confronting these consequences, confronting these sins. And that would also explain why a lot of people felt that Kaneki felt off this chapter. There's just so much processing on Kaneki's mind right now that when he woke up, that explains why he kind of felt numb to everything around him. Plus, I think this kind of explains why Kaneki did not have too many character interactions in this chapter, because Kaneki right here is waking up to a different world than the one he knew when he transformed into Dragon. Everything is vastly different. Humans and ghouls are currently working together. They put aside their differences. Humans are currently turning into ghouls, and Dragon is still active, even though Kaneki was taken out of it. And then throw everything on top of that with the fact that he killed people transforming into Dragon. So Kaneki being numb to this entire situation makes a lot of sense, though I was still hoping for a few character interactions, which I think we will get in the future chapters to come, because he didn't even say a word to Hanami, to Banjo, to Yomo. Tsukiyama, out of all people, he didn't even say a word to. I expected Shu to be weeping from his eyes just knowing that his king was regaining consciousness, but we didn't get anything from Shu. But from the brief character interactions that we did get in this chapter, I still really enjoyed them. Psycho was cute this entire chapter when she immediately hugged Kaneki and then followed him around the whole time like a cute little puppy dog. Psycho is the best. Nishiki even made me laugh in this chapter when he grabbed Kaneki's face. He's like, "You immortal bastard, why haven't you died yet?" That was really within Nishiki's character, and I really enjoyed that moment as well. But also having Kimi evaluate Kaneki, finding out that his vision loss and headaches are gone, and that even though he's got this Kagane body, he's in perfectly good health, even though his body is a complete mystery to Kimi. I enjoyed that section as well. But that brief embrace by Toka and Kaneki, though I liked it, I would have liked a little bit more between Toka and Kaneki. But I am not worried, because I can see a future chapter dedicated to Toka and Kaneki having a conversation, and I can see 3 main characters actually getting the chance to sit down and talk with Kaneki: Mitsuki, Toka, and Hide. Speaking of Hide, Kaneki finally finds out that Hide is in fact alive. These are words that Kaneki has awaited to hear for such a long time. He thought for the longest that Hide was dead, that he ate his best friend. But now he is realizing not only is Hide alive, but he is also the person that brought the GOAT organization and the CCG investigators together to go get Kaneki out of Dragon. And we have these 3 panels of Kaneki processing those words, coming to the realization that those are in fact true and that his best friend is alive. And then we transition into this awesome panel of the sunshine of the series, Hide smiling, such an awesome panel with Kaneki saying the words, "Hide, he's alive." And even though right now Kaneki wants nothing more than to see Hide with his own eyes, he's got other things that he currently has to deal with. So the conversation of Hide and Kaneki is still being put on hold, but I know in the future we will either get a chapter or 2 dedicated to these 2 sitting down and finally having Kaneki have a conversation with Hide, and I am so looking forward to that. But as it stands right now, Kaneki still needs to face his sins and face the destruction that he did to Tokyo. So he is requesting for him to leave HQ so that way he can walk the streets and see the destruction firsthand, and he ends up getting escorted by Psycho and Urei. And this part starts to get very nostalgic because Kaneki starts to reminisce and points out all the locations that the QS squad used to go to back during the early days of Tokyo Ghoul. And this really shocks Urei because he is seeing the memories of Heise coming through the persona of Kaneki. So this shows Urei that Heise isn't really gone within Kaneki's persona. But the one section I really like within here is that Urei really calls Kaneki out on keeping his thoughts within his mind. He refers to him as Sasaki and he says, "Why don't you stop keeping everything within your mind to yourself? I can at least listen to what you have to say. Just pondering things alone won't lead to any useful insight." And to think, Urei despised Heise during the beginning of Tokyo Ghoul, and look where we are now. This is character development at its finest. But when we dive into the section when Kaneki, Urei, and Psycho come to learn about humans turning into ghouls, this section starts to get very interesting because we see the return of a very small character from Tokyo Ghoul Part 1 that Ishida is now bringing back, and it's a human turning into a ghoul. This character we met back in Volume 3 of Tokyo Ghoul, and she goes by the name of Ruisawa, and she was a part of the CCG Intelligence Department. So a quick shout out to Anime Mania, who was the first person to point this out to me. When I went back and saw her character back in Volume 3, it made me realize just how far in advance Ishida had this planned for her character, because when you read her dialogue, when Toka is talking with her about Hinami and about like, how can you guys hurt a little girl? She replies with, "It's okay because ghouls aren't humans. Since we have concerns that they will cause us harm, it's natural for us to destroy them." It really goes to show how ironic her current predicament actually is. A human who despised ghouls and wanted them eradicated off the face of the earth has now transformed into a full-blown ghoul where she is feasting on human flesh. Ishida, job well done with that callback. But now we finally reach the last page of this chapter with Furuta in control of the news. He has taken on the persona of a news reporter and is looking to get an inside scoop with one of the Kagane monsters. I have so many questions when it comes to this scenario alone, because right now, as it stands, all electricity within Tokyo is basically out, and if Furuta is able to project himself onto this big screen, he is able to control the media, he can control the news. So how is he going to spin this story, and how does this factor into his master plan? Because if he controls the news, he can spin the story any way he wants. He can talk negatively about Kaneki, or he can just flip script and talk positively about Kaneki. He can tell truth, he can tell lies. How does this factor into his master plan? I really want to know. And where the hell is Rize during all of this? These are the questions I have right now, guys, and that brings us to the end of chapter 163. I am hoping we have more Furuta with chapter 164, but so far, knowing Ishida, I have no idea what to expect with 164. We can go in many different directions, but I am still excited to see what we end up getting. And I'm very curious to see how many more chapters we actually have, because we are approaching the end. We just don't know how inevitable that end and how close it actually is. So I definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts, theories, and opinions on this week's latest chapter and where we could possibly go next chapter. What are your thoughts on Furuta with that cliffhanger? What do you think he is talking about news-wise? Leave that down in the comments below. And if you guys want to talk about Tokyo Ghoul outside of YouTube, feel free to follow me on Twitter, guys. A link to my Twitter can be found in the description below. Anyway, guys, I am really looking forward to see what chapter 164 has for us when it comes out next week. But until then, I'll talk with you guys later. And this is Furuta, signing out.